So it's not an issue from a legal standpoint.
So it's views versus protecting your boat, essentially.
Correct. And they would have to meet certain standards, for Mr. Foss, I guess, so the hurricanes will take them away. But it's totally a zoning issue that you can do whatever you want.
Okay.
It's come up before several times.
That's all I had.
Thank you. Councilwoman Searle? Okay. Thank you. I had just one concern. I heard from a couple citizens, and they, I guess, were suggesting that the seaside was open. And for some reason, I thought there were some pending code issues over there, and I didn't know if those had been resolved or if anyone had been over there to look at that. Because I remember I think their dock failed to be up to code at some point. And I didn't know, Mr. Foss, if you know anything about that.
Yeah, before I'd allow them to open their doors, they rebuilt the dock. About 75% of it's been redecked. They're working on the last 25%, towards where the shrimp boats are. But from there, the fish cleaning station down to the two Hooters, that end has all been replaced, all the deck boards are. But they went to the state, they declared themselves having food, which frozen food doesn't count, we've now been told. So they're not selling and serving food, because in order to be open, you're supposed to have 51% of your income from food. By what the state says now, I guess they're a bar and they're not supposed to be open at this time. And I know, I heard through the grapevine that.
And from the city's standpoint, I was just concerned about the code issues to make sure everyone's safe over there. So that's what I was kind of driving at.
Yeah, the fire department's been through the building, and they're clear.
Okay.
The state says they did.
Okay, very well. Thank you. And that's all I had. I'm going to pass it to Councilman Dittmer at this time.
Actually, most of the stuff I have, I put under old business and a few to be addressed in the agenda. So.
Okay, thank you. At this time, I wanted to move on to our consent agenda. I was looking for a motion. All in favor? Aye. We're going to move on to council business. The first item is the approval of the tentative millage rate, and I was going to pass that on to Mr. Sossaman.
Thank you, Mayor. As I stated earlier, we're working on the budget, and there's a deadline that we're trying to achieve. So tonight, you need to not set your final millage rate for the year 2021, but the tentative. As you know, right now your current millage rate is 5.7847. If you decided, like you can do, to do the rollback rate, and we don't have all the state revenues yet, so I would caution you about doing the rollback rate, because the rollback would be back to 5.2209. Instead, after discussing with staff, I would look at the standpoint and recommend to you to look at a tentative 1 mil increase from the 5.7847 to 6.7847. That would, in effect, raise somewhere in the high $200,000 range, like $290,000 and $290,000 and change. It's my understanding that heretofore there has been some dipping into reserves as opposed to looking at a millage increase, and I would encourage you not to continue that practice, because after a while the well kind of runs dry, or else gets to a point to where it's very low and dangerous. You need to be able to, before your taxes start coming in after the billings go out, to be able to operate the city as the citizens expect. And to do that, obviously, you need ongoing revenues as well as those reserves. So my recommendation again would be to look at a tentative 1 mil increase to 6.4787.
And it's just set as the maximum, just to clarify.
Yes, sir. And I think what we should, by the 13th of August, when we have that first workshop, we're going to have a better handle on all of your reserves, both the restricted as well as the unrestricted. I've already discussed some of the restricted ones that probably haven't been used, that could be used for certain capital projects. I know at the last meeting, you yourself, Mayor, indicated that you'd like to look at some capital improvement projects or have a capital improvement program. Without that reserve to be able to be set going toward capital programs, it's really tough to have a capital improvement program. So I've been talking obviously with our city attorney, with our city clerk, and he's helped me find some projects in the past that have been discussed by this board, but obviously not advanced forward. And really the only way to do that is to have the capital, and the only way to have that capital is to start rebuilding your reserve funds, both the restricted ones like water and sewer, for instance, those are restricted and you have to use them for water and sewer projects, not other general government. And your millage can be used for those other general government capital projects that are needed. And so again, that's why I'm looking at it. And again, we don't know. I talked to Debbie Manns yesterday over in Newport Richey, and she's like us. We're still waiting to find out what type of state revenues are going to be available this year because of the COVID-19. We don't know. Usually we already know by now, or cities and counties in Florida would know what those state shared revenues would be. We know they're going to be down. We just don't know how much down they are going to be. And of course, some of that's going to depend on how much longer this COVID-19 pandemic crisis goes on.
Thank you, Mr. Sossaman. At this time, I'd like to open this for discussion amongst council and/or any motions.
Just going back, looking over some of the local cities. Going back to last year, Newport Richey was at 8.75 on their millage rate. Zephyr Hills at 6.35, Dade City at 7.15, and St. Leo's at 7.0. And I believe St. Leo doesn't even have a police department. So even at 6.7, we are still by far the lowest. And we are going to have some major infrastructure deals coming up in the city. So it's one thing, even 1% might be, people hate raising taxes, and of course I hate paying them too, but that's something we're going to have to look at because it's going to come back and get us later. So based on what we hear from the state, obviously we'll have to revisit this and discuss possibly that rate.
Right, sir, and as you've indicated, you really won't be setting that final budget number and millage until, about 2 months or so from now, over in September.
Thank you, that's all I had.
Thank you. I was see if anyone on council had any comments and/or motion.
I think this is going to be an unusual budget year for us because of the COVID virus. We're not going to what our revenues are for sure for a while. We have to be prepared to continue to take care of our residents the way that they're accustomed to. So
And
we have to think seriously about it. And I don't want to pay any more taxes than anybody else does.
I'm in agreement with that, but I think one of the bigger issues is we're in a time where I think that not having extra money in the reserves is dangerous to the city financially and for our long-term well-being. So I would rather set the maximum and then when the budget comes out, readdress it and see where we're going to be.
My point actually is I thought the maximum may be too low for what we're going to have coming up.
well, I think we should allow ourselves the flexibility right now to go to the maximum, which is essentially what this is doing, and then, really have a good idea, hopefully in 2 months, where our state revenues are coming in, have a little bit more clarity on this COVID situation, hopefully in 2 months.
Because this is all going to affect, Penny from Pinellas is probably going to go.
Yeah, penny for Pasco is going, no
for
doubt.
Pasco, excuse me, yeah. It's going to be.
I'll take it from
Yeah.
Pinellas too, though,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
if
Well,
they
they
want
get
to
more
give
than
it,
we
but-
do, so. Those are things we have to consider, and if we set this at the max now, at this rate, and we come back.
We can always back it down if need be,
I don't mind backing
or
it down. My point was, do we raise it slightly higher? Because if, like you said, we lose all that extra money,
I don't think we can go higher, can we?
we set it at 1%?
We can set it under anything
I
under the
thought
cap.
it was limited on a,
1% annually or something?
That's what we've been doing for weeks, but I'm waiting.
You
over a course of several budget years, I thought.
No.
All right.
dropped it down almost 3%, down to 3.3.
I thought you could back it down as much as you want. You can't raise it too much. That's where and I may be wrong on this.
Technically, you could raise it more than just 1 mil, which is actually more than 1%, but to do that, you have to have unanimity, if I'm not mistaken. There's a couple of different levels you can go. Obviously, you're a 5-member board, so 3 votes could get you to that 1 mil increase. To do anything more than that, there's another ratchet up, if you will, that you could go another percent or so to that level, but that would take a, say, super majority or 4 out of 5. To go higher than that, you'd have to have a unanimous vote.
But my point was, say we said 1.5 instead of 1 as a maximum, we can always back down to the original. It's just there in case of emergency and we need it, correct? I mean, that's why we always set it higher.
Like I say, it's, I get what you're saying is out of an abundance of caution, you'd rather be a little higher than lower.
Right. My point is that I thought being a little higher,
Is that right?
based on everything that's happening in the world right now, maybe, he said bring in an extra $200,000. If we had another 0.5%, it's another $100,000.
140.
Right. Just something to consider, because I just hate to get caught short when we have those other funds dry up on us.
I don't disagree with your logic at all.
Okay.
No, sir.
Kinsella, do you have anything you'd like to weigh in on this issue?
I do like the idea of Councilman Dittmer raising it, 1.5 to have that leeway just in case. Don't know exactly what we need to do, but I like that thought.
Sure, already
And then
voted.
be able to.
And
back
it's
off.
just the ability to raise it. We're not raising rates right
Correct.
now. I
We're
just-
not raising
correct.
rates,
I'm
it's
just
the ability, but
stating-
also, it's easy to go back, but
Correct.
if we get in trouble, it's an act of Congress to go back up.
Correct.
I think you're right. I think you're right.
I wasn't aware we could do it. I thought we were limited at 1 mil, though. That's where my confusion lied.
You still may be right.
One of the other issues that I have is we have a lot of people in this community that are on a fixed income and that have retired and live in a home where they may not be able to afford if we raise taxes that quickly.
But we're not setting it. We're just saying that's the highest possible. And
Correct.
We've always done a rollback. We've always come back.
Correct, but even if we set it 1.5% higher and we decide that that's what we need, you know, I think that's going to be tough on some of our people, especially the people with fixed income.
But that would be another battle.
So we'll lack of services if we can't afford them.
Yeah, you could, a simple majority vote, Jim and I were just talking, you could bump it all the way to 8.11, 8.1356, but I'm not saying do that now. I'm just don't want a mutiny on the bounty, so to speak, or with a 2/3 max, you could go up to 8.9, but then that starts really encroaching.
I just think we're cutting ourselves a little bit short based on all the impending financial that's gonna come down the road. And we can always roll it back like we have. We're not setting it. We're just saying this would be our maximum. So, I'd like to make a motion to bump that 1.5.
I'll second that.
Before we vote, this is something that I really want to be able to comment on. Does anyone have any comment from the public on this particular issue? Mr. Mueller, come on up to the podium.
I think you're right.
Dave Mueller, 5439 Blue Point Drive, 34668. Thank you for letting me address you. I think you guys are talking on the right subject, but there's two sides to every coin. One side's revenue, the other side's expense. And it's incumbent upon each of you and our administration and the citizens to look closely at what gets into the budget. Ultimately, this is a great opportunity to reset the levels that this city is performing at and potentially look at opportunities to trim cost and continue on with the various things that we're trying to accomplish. Now, I heard that we have exhausted reserves, and I don't believe that's the case, because I believe there's funds that have been placed aside that are earning revenue, earning interest, and certainly need to look at all the reserves, and that probably needs to get on the table as well. Just keep that in the back of your mind, that probably need to look at the full picture. The next piece of this equation is ultimately, I know Mr. Sossaman is going to do the best job he can, but ultimately, there's going to be somebody else in charge of this later on that ultimately is going to have to live by something that's been defined by other parties. So it's an inherited kind of thing. So it's going to be a tedious task, and hopefully we're able to make those good decisions to make that palatable for everybody here. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Reverend Spalding?
Sandra Spalding, 8612 Green Street. Hello? You want to raise the percentage to a certain level, and you can go that high? But then I feel personally, my opinion, once you do that, you're not being as careful with your budget because you've got that extra to play with. Why not bring it back to raise the percentage after you work on the budget and see if it's really necessary? Because then you'll know if you have to raise the taxes. That's just my opinion. I'll leave you with that.
Thank you. Is there anyone else from the general public? I'm going to open it up for discussion here. I think one of the issues is it would be great to be able to kind of bump this down the road and evaluate the budget, but I think there's some mandates from the legislation that we are working with timeframes where we have to set this, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct?
That is correct, sir.
Okay.
Tonight's, technically, you could wait till midnight, before midnight, a couple of days from now, because you got to do it according to you got to do it within 60 days prior to October 1, which is when the next budget takes effect. So tonight, you're kind of at a line of demarcation, if you will.
Just to kind of further, basically state legislature says you have to set the rate now even though you don't know what your budget is, and or the maximum rate now even though you don't necessarily know what your budget is. And if you shoot too low, then it's very hard to get it raised up. You have to go through a lot of steps at this point to try and get it raised, whereas right now we can just do it by a simple majority of the vote. So it's it's kind of saying, well, we could do this and then we'll get within the budget, but if we miss, then it's very hard to get it raised to what we need.
Right.
And the only other comment that I wanted to make is I'm comfortable following the recommendations, which are going up 1%, but the motion and second is for 1.5%, and I'm not comfortable with that, and I didn't know if there's any further discussion or any other opinions before we vote.
Again, we're not setting it. This is a tentative rate.
I understand.
Roll it back to whatever we want once we find out what the real numbers are going to be.
Okay.
That having been said, if there's no further discussion, let's put it to a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Nay?
Nay.
For legal reasons, two things. If we could poll the vote, you'll see the maximum millage rate calculator was given to you. You can see the numbers in there. And just so everybody understands, if you set a rate of, at a certain number, and then when you do your budget process, decide you want to go higher than that. Okay, the reason for setting the maximum is so the trim notices can go out. If you go higher than that, then you have to notify every single taxpayer of a tax increase by certified mail, I believe. Usually this is done. There's your calculator. You can see the figures, see the majority vote, the supermajority votes that are there. But so since it's a majority vote, could you poll the votes just so we have that, because you have to have a majority vote? I want to put it on the record.
Do we need a majority or supermajority?
That's my understanding. Usually, this is not my issue really, this is the finance department's, but I believe it's just a majority vote. Majority vote, maximum millage rate allowed 8.1, so that's my understanding.
Okay.
Looking at what's presented.
Can we poll the?
The motion was made to raise the tentative millage rate to 1.5%. I had Mayor Scott Tremblay as a nay. I had Vice Mayor William Dittmer as a yay. Councilwoman Jenny Sorrell as a nay. Councilman Tom McCleary was a yay. And Councilman Tom Kinsella as a yay. The motion passes 3-2.
Thank you very much. With that, we'll move on to the next item up for council business. And that's going to be the discussion of draft for a golf cart ordinance. And I wanted to turn that over to our city attorney, Mr. Matthew, for introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Council at the last meeting asked to bring this back again. I think you wanted to have more conversation, more thought and conversation about it. The only difference of what is here this evening compared to the last meeting is I gave you the resolution that was passed in 2015. As you can see, what they did was when they passed the original ordinance regarding the golf carts, the city said there'd be a $50 payment for registration, and it was somewhat silent on whether that would be yearly, annually, or just a one-time payment. And I think since that went into effect, that was read to be just a one-time payment. So it's before you, and so it's kind of where you left it. I don't know whether you want to, the way I set it up, just as a reminder from last time, is if you want to give reciprocity to any other city, whether it be Newport Richey or otherwise, I've left that it could be done by resolution. So in case you wanted to change it at any time, you wouldn't have to go through all the trouble of changing the whole ordinance. As you can see, when it came to it's already done by resolution in here. If you read some of the finer points of the original ordinance, it talks about, well, whatever you want to charge per year, you do by resolution. So we generally do that with a lot of statutes. So if you want to proceed with doing it, let me know if you want to tweak it in any way. I think I've heard some conversation last time, make some of there's registration and regulation. If you want to make some of those match or whatever, it's totally up to this council, but I can do whatever you want.
Thank you. I appreciate the introduction. If I may, there's kind of two separate issues. Number one, whether or not we want reciprocity at all. And number two, if we do that, whether or not we want to amend what our ordinance in terms of what we need in order to qualify to get a sticker. I think everybody sounded like they were on board with reciprocity, but my thought and my humble opinion, if we're going to do that, we should have the same guidelines of the city that we're going to have reciprocity with, or cities, but in this particular case, it's Newport Richey. And their guidelines are much more stringent to get a golf cart sticker. And I think that if we're going to pass reciprocity, we should look at their guidelines and potentially see if we want to amend ours to kind of mirror theirs. Some of the differences that I saw reading through them, number one is they require insurance. We do not, and I really like the idea of insurance, whether, in my humble opinion. One of the other big differences is they require a yearly inspection, and then they require a yearly sticker with a fee. So what my recommendation is that we have a yearly inspection where we look at the insurance, make sure it's current, charge $25, and just make sure everything works on the golf cart that we already have, which are all your safety features, blinkers, mirrors, horn, etc. So that's my opinion on this issue, and I just wanted to open it up for further discussion with council.
Mr. Mayor, if I could
Yes.
hate to interrupt you, but Section 36-163 of the Port Richey Ordinance, which is in front of you, regarding regulation, is the Port Richey Ordinance. Golf carts may only be operated on authorized road by operators with current valid driver's licenses. Golf carts must be covered with liability insurance.
Okay.
So we already have that in there.
Because it's not on our checklist when they actually go.
Which is a different issue.
Okay.
It is mandatory,
Okay.
okay? I don't know, I see the checklist from the police department, maybe they provided at the time
Okay.
they signed that, I don't know, but it's already mandatory. You know,
Okay.
if council says, hey, look, let's make sure we have that, we could put that in a resolution and change it, well, none of that's the problem.
Okay.
That's already the case, now it's a matter of, are we doing it?
Okay, so, and then the only other issue is they have a yearly renewal where they check everything and we don't, which I would like to go to if we're gonna do this. And I was gonna open it for discussion.
I totally agree with that. These golf carts need to be checked annually, and when to be issued that sticker. Our police department needs to really take a look at and make sure that they, 10 o'clock at night, I see them out there on our roads, and God forbid, without the lights or anything, could be several problems we don't need. But having that inspection and redo this inspection sheet, I think there's a lot to be desired on it. But redo this and add the visually looking at, making sure that the insurance is there, because, I mean, just verbally saying it means nothing.
Thank you, Mr. Kinsella. Is there any other comment? Mr. McClary?
Okay.
Mr. Nittmer?
I was going to say, if we are changing it to a yearly at $25, would there be a way to grandfather people in who've paid their 50 for, say, the first 2 years to equal it out so nobody feels like they're paying more?
We could waive the $25 fee the first year for everybody and just move on from there if we want to do that.
It's reasonable. Thank you.
That'd just be my suggestion.
So one item I have in terms of reciprocity, I noticed that they have a maximum of 20 miles per hour on Newport Richey streets. We have a maximum of 15 miles per hour on Port Richey streets. We may want to just clarify that just so you don't get confusion between residents and, I don't know how much they enforce that policy per se, but, keep it consistent across.
And I agree. I think the 20 mile an hour makes more sense because most of the roads, I think, have a 30 mile an hour speed limit.
And I think those golf carts have a governor that just basically stops them at 20, but doesn't stop them at 15. I
Correct.
believe. I don't have one, but.
Most of them, that's correct, I believe. Councilwoman Searle, do you have any thoughts?
The only way that anybody from Newport Richey or Port Richey can get to one of the cities is through light. Can we do that? Is that legal? To cross that 4-lane highway?
I think that's a question for DOT, but I think that's beyond the scope of what we're kind of dealing with here. But the answer is no, I don't think you can.
We don't have jurisdiction on that road.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear Councilwoman Sorrell's question.
Crossing the US 19.
Thank you, Councilwoman. About 4 months ago, written inquiry was made of the Department of Transportation. I believe I have it with me. The short answer is no, and the reasons why. And I can get it for you. I know exactly what it says. They went through a lot of trouble responding to us. It's the width of the highway at certain entrance points. It's like 15 feet too wide. Do you understand me? They went if you wanted to, but just no way they're going to allow it. Okay, they went through a lot of trouble. I'll see that all the council members get a copy of that. But I believe Dr. Martinez had requested that when it first came up, and it was a pretty big no. Now, that doesn't help you at all in terms of the bigger picture, but whether it's our golf carts or Newport Richey's golf carts, they're not going to allow them to go across that highway. It's too wide and too many lanes.
So with that, I'm looking for further discussion amongst council and/or any motions. And the motion that I would be looking for is a motion to allow reciprocity, but also a motion to amend some of those other items that we've discussed. And I was going to see if anyone was willing to make that motion at this time.
Has anyone talked to Newport Richie? I'm assuming they're open to reciprocity, assuming we match their criteria, or has that not been, or we're making the first, still making the first move and seeing what happens?
We're making the first move. I had a meeting with Mayor Marlowe, and he really liked the idea of reciprocity, as we are as close together, and I think we're going to have a hodgepodge of golf carts on either side of 19 at some point. So, you know, I would think that he seemed to be have a positive. He was receptive when I talked to him about it. But I can't speak for the rest of the council.
Yeah, the only reason I'm asking that is if we start putting new requirements on changing, going to yearly registration, et cetera, and it takes 2 years for Newport Richie to come around and grant that reciprocity, then we have some explaining to do to our citizens that we made everything so stringent and then they haven't done anything.
Well, in my humble opinion, I think we should probably put those regulations in, even if we don't grant reciprocity with Newport Richie. That's just my opinion. So, you know, I think they're almost independent of each other to a certain degree, because I think that we should take that step whether or not there's going to be reciprocity. So I don't know, you know, if we can handle this in 2 different motions, which may be the way to handle it, or if we can put all these motions together. And for legal clarification, I don't know, can we handle it if they wanted to in different motions, or any recommendations?
To keep it simple, first of all, if you do, that's kind of why I put it in as a resolution for the reciprocity. So you pass it, and then 4 months go by, you didn't
And they don't need
that's
pull
why I
back
did
out.
it that way.
Okay.
Why don't you just kind of address them one at a time? And, you know, first of all, the golf cart register, you know, the insurance and the driver's license, we already have those. Okay. That has to be done. I mean, it's done through the police department, so he heard you, and he'll do that. But more importantly, you'll need it when you get their sticker each year, and you'll also need it if you're stopped on the side of the road, okay, for both of those places. And I could put that in the resolution, so I can put in if you want to. So in other words, the resolution things are simple, so I can put in there it's a $25 fee instead of a one-time $50 fee, make it annual. Okay, and I could also put a proof of registration on it, you know, so I could do that in a resolution. Now, in terms of the miles per hour, I'd have to change our code, which is no big deal. I mean, it's right here. You know, strike off at 15 and make it 20, so that's up to you. So you could probably do those 2 things separately, you know. When you do I presume if you're going to do the reciprocity and the, you know, the insurance, make sure that happens, you know, show it at the time you get it. And the $25, you could do that in one motion, I guess, and do the changing of the actual ordinance, which is a different issue to the 20 miles an hour. You could do it that way. You can do it any way you want. As long as I understand what you want, just vote on it, you know.
Okay.
If you think it's piecemeal, then make several motions, you know, whatever you want. And 20 miles an hour is as fast as you can let them go. Okay, it's not. And by the way, here's before you leave, if anyone wants to see it, this is the note from the Department of Transportation, if you're curious. And I'll send a copy to everybody.
With that, I was looking to see if anyone was willing to frame any motions on this.
To set the 20 mile per hour limit, reciprocity with the city of Newport Richie, requirements of assurance of time of stickering, and changing to the $25 per year annual sticker.
And one point of clarification, are we going to start the inspections this year? And we're going to start the inspections this year, but the $25 fee in 2022 then?
Like I said, some people already paid their 50, so I'll feel it's right to come up again for another 25.
So is that part of the motion?
Yes.
Okay. So the inspection will happen for everybody in 2021, but the $25 fee, if they already have a sticker, won't start until 2022.
I understand the motion. If it starts in January 1st, gives the, police department a little time to get it ready. And number two is you could do, since it'd be yearly, you can have a different color each year or whatever you do, that kind of stuff. So I understand the motion. So he's going for everything. You want everything we discussed. Understood, sir.
Does everybody understand the motion as it sits?
The only question I have is there going to be a window for the renewal? I mean, come January 1st, if we set it as January 1st, is there a time period that they have to renew like our current?
We should give everyone 60.
I guess, Councilman, I would presume, putting it off, I discussed this with Mr. Sussman, that's why January, because I would presume if this goes through, 60 days earlier, everybody that's holding those, 91 of them, by the way, in this city, gets a letter. Hey, we're changing it to a yearly fee of $25. Okay, if you've paid within the last year, we'll give you a credit, but you're going to have to come in each year to pay the money, and I presume you want them inspected each year, right?
Correct.
Yeah, so in other words, yeah, that's the whole purpose of pushing it back, so you'd have to, send that out 60, 90 days in advance, yeah.
So the theory is in December, you have to get your sticker for January 1st, and then that will take you through the following year.
Yeah, that'd be details we'd leave to the police.
So with that, we have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Before we go any further, I want to open this up to the general public to see if anyone has any comment. Reverend Spalding.
Sandra Spalding, 8612 Green Street. The city of Newport Richey, they do cross 19 in their golf carts. I have seen them cross 19. So if that's illegal, and when we have people here with golf carts, if they want to cross 19, how's that going to work? Are they going to get ticketed or just look the other way? What? But they do cross 19 all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. We'll call the mounting police too. How's that? No, just to be aware of it, that they are crossing, because I have stopped for the light many times and have seen them cross. I don't think it should be illegal if they have the light. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Spalding. Mr. Mueller, welcome to the podium.
Thank you, Dave Mueller, 5439 Blue Point Drive, 34668, Fort Ritchie, Florida. I find it interesting that we want to inspect golf carts rather than cars. Cars aren't inspected on our streets. If there's a violation, it's incumbent upon the owner to ensure that those things all function properly. I don't know why we would take it upon ourselves to actually do the inspection. I think you can have an individual file a form indicating this is the situation, that you have to have all these things, and pay a fee and move forward. And if at some point in time that individual is stopped and found to have something in violation, then it's a point he can be ticketed for that and make them aware of that. We're making this little thing something big, and we miss the point on the big things like cars. How many cars are driving around? Nobody's inspecting them. If this taillight goes out, a police could stop that individual and say, hey, you got a bad taillight. It's just a thought. And we focused on the right stuff.
Thank you, Mr. Mueller. Anyone else from the general public? Seeing no hands, at this time, we can open back up for discussion. If there's no further discussion here, then we'll look to put it to a vote. Seeing no further discussion, we'll put it to a vote. And everyone understands how it's been framed and seconded. That having been said, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Move on to council business item 5, which is approval of drug recognition expert.
Mr. Mayor, not to interrupt you, I'll bring it back as a draft next time, because there's a lot of moving parts here. You get a little extra time. We got time, right?
Yeah.
So I'll bring it back and I'll go through what it says now. Is that all right with everyone?
Yes, thank you.
Sorry to interrupt you.
No, that's okay, sorry. So I wanted to go back to council business item 5, which is approval of drug recognition expert, which is DRE, overtime reimbursement grant. And for that, I wanted to pass this to Mr. Sossaman for introduction.
Yes, Mayor. It's my understanding that this is an overtime reimbursement grant. It would not exceed $500 within the agency. Currently, the city has only one certified DRE as part of the police department, and I know we have our new chief, Cyrus Robinson, as well as Captain Koch here. So this will allow for a reimbursement of overtime for the DRE to conduct an evaluation in an amount of the overtime. So it's not going to cost us anything. Actually, we'll pick up some money for the overtime reimbursement. So unless the chief and the captain disagree, which I don't think they will, we'd like to recommend that you approve.
Thank you, Mr. Sossaman. Any need for discussion?
Yeah, I have a question. This is just, the time frame on this is just good for a year?
Yes. Yes, only good for a year at this point in time. We have to renew it every year.
But have this overtime, I mean, have they experienced more than that $500 limit?
No.
How often have this officer been used?
Have they reported that one?
Out of curiosity.
Officer Williams is currently our DRE, and throughout his tenure is doing so, he's done several. Probably most of them have been during the course of his normal shift. It's only a couple occasions that we've actually had to call him in on an overtime capacity to conduct a DRE evaluation. So the frequency of that is not very great. But what this grant does is it allows us the opportunity that if we have to use him in a time that he's off and we call him in as a recall, that any salary that goes to him is subject to that reimbursement. So basically, we would be calling him in at the expense of the grant up to the amount of that $500 maximum. And it counts. It can go for us or mutual aid for other neighboring agencies as well. So, for example, if we were taking part in a multi-agency enforcement wave or something like that, we could actually have Officer Williams come in and be part of that wave and performing the DRE evaluations as necessary, and that would count towards the reimbursement. So we could participate and use his expertise at basically no cost.
So the maximum is $500, nothing greater than that, just in case we get a busy year, and he's called in more than.
Right, and I'd have to clarify, but I believe that $500 is actually per occurrence. I don't believe it's throughout the duration.
Okay.
So rough math, it would be roughly about 13 and a half hours of him doing evaluations. An average evaluation would probably take about an hour to do. It's a little bit more extensive of a process than a typical DUI investigation that you typically see or are familiar with on the roadside. So he's got some specialty techniques and stuff that he does to make that evaluation and that expert conclusion.
So this is per occasion, not just.
My understanding is the dollar amount is per occasion, but before we reach that amount, that we'll definitely get that clarified so that we don't exceed it. And if there were an occasion that we did need to exceed those hours in a grand total, we would be in this same situation we are currently, to where we would have to utilize him. The only difference is we would bear that expense as we would today if we had to call him in. It just takes some of that expense and puts it back onto another entity.
And can I kind of touch on that for a moment? Because he's also our traffic homicide investigator, and they kind of overlap, if I'm not mistaken. A lot of our homicides are a result of or spawn DRE investigations or a need for a DRE, correct?
There can be an overlap there. It's not an automatic. I know in the last 2 years, we'll say, we've had, I believe, 2 serious injury motor vehicle crashes that were alcohol related and resulting in extensive criminal charges. So there is definitely a potential correlation there. So as long as he's doing the DRE evaluation, that portion of it would count towards his grant. If we call him in to do a traffic homicide investigation in and of itself, that does not apply towards this. This is just for the DRE evaluations.
Okay. But if there's a homicide where he also does this evaluation, we would get reimbursed for that, because I know the homicide investigations require a lot of time, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, sir. They could be quite extensive.
Okay.
I would submit that I believe we could probably make a case that the portion of that investigation that he did the DRE evaluation would be subject to this.
Would be
this
subject to
procedure.
reimbursement. Okay.
The remainder of the investigation, I don't know that would necessarily fall into this category, though.
Understood. Thank you. Did anyone else have any comment or question? That having been said, I was looking for a motion.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve the drug recognition expert overtime reimbursement grant contract.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Next item up for council business is the renewal of anti-human trafficking data collection agreement. And I'm going to pass that to our city manager, Mr. Sossaman.
Oh, thank you, Mayor. As you indicated, this is an anti-human trafficking data collection agreement, and it's for Pasco County. Currently, this agreement, which was approved last July 2019, expires the end of August 2020, and the new renewal will be for a 2-year time frame, so that gives you more time. Every agency, law enforcement agency, all the municipalities, their police departments, as well as the Pasco Sheriff's Department, currently participate. So I guess we're going to be the last one in if you agree to it tonight, and we do recommend that you do approve it, and that will allow us to participate in that collection of data for anti-human trafficking, which we all understand is a problem.
Thank you, Mr. Sossaman. I was going to open this up for discussion and or motion with council.
Motion to approve the anti-human trafficking data collection agreement.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. That concludes our council business, and it brings us to old business. I know that I've been starting to my right, so we're going to start to my left with our Vice Mayor Dittmer.
I have a few items on old business. One will have to go to the chief or the captain on the update on the CAD system.
We spoke with a representative from Pasco's IT section just today. Actually had contact with them to get an update because we hadn't heard from our last correspondence. If you remember the last time we were here, the captain mentioned that we were looking to get refresher training for the agency personnel because it had been since September, October of last year that they had that initial training. According to the representative from Pasco, he had reached out to their training coordinator and he has not heard back from them yet. And once he does, they'll set the dates for the training, and after the training is completed, we can go live at any time after that.
All right, they've been really dragging their feet on this. This has been going on a while. All right, thank you, Chief. Follow-up would be for the city manager regarding the Nix Park boat ramp assistance from the county. You were going to have a chat with them, I believe, last time we met.
I'm still waiting on an answer from the county, but I have discussed it with Aaron's Engineering, and they are working on updating it so they can freshen it up and then we can go live with the bid. But it's my understanding that there's $228,000 based on the research that we've done that's available for it. Unfortunately, the previous bids came in. One came in at $296 and change. It was rebid, and the same construction company rebid it They still came in at 289. So if we can get it down right now, it's from what Chris Martin with Ayers Engineering is telling me that he's seen a lot of projects come back. So we're trying to do that and get it to come back to us at 228 or less. So
And have we got a commitment for what the county is willing to do for us with that?
It's I know the commitment that they had plus the other reimbursement that we have to spend it is a total of 228. If we can get any additional money out of them, I will find out. As a matter of fact, I have found if we can use it for this, if it meets one of the national objectives of the Community Development Block Grant Program, sometimes you hear CDBG. The city did not use its allotment last year. I think our total at that time was just under $15,000. And talking to Denise Lindsay with Pasco County, who's going to actually come visit me tomorrow, and I'll find out those national objectives, and I'll have a further update for you at the next meeting. I said, well, can we roll that, excuse me, can we roll that 15,000 from last year into the next year? It's her understanding of mine that we can, so that would give us a total of 30. That would come close to making up the difference.
Yeah, right, okay. And then the last one is, we discussed this last meeting also, review of our water rates. We want to take a look at that for the same reasons. I know we're the lowest water rates currently, I think, in the county. And for the same impact that we're going to have for everywhere else, we might need to look at that. So it's something you can get together for us on where everybody else is currently and what we have to look at for future.
Right, and it's my understanding, it's probably yours as well, that we have some of the lowest water rates around.
We do.
And I've already talked to one company that does those types of analysis. And obviously I've worked some with Sean Newhouse, who's here, our utilities director, and he agrees. I think the last update was back in 2013 or something of that order. It's been 7 or 8 years ago. Yeah, our city clerks are
Well,
agreeing.
at one point, we froze any increases. It was supposed to be an increase per year. We froze the increases, and that goes back probably that far, right, Sal?
The 2016 4% increase was waived.
It was waived, okay.
Right.
We need to revisit that, like I said, for the upcoming shortfall we're gonna have in finances, I believe, from the COVID. So we need to readdress that, take a new look at it.
Right, we'll probably have to go out to bid because I just think even though we've got like 3,300 customers, within the city as well as outside of the city, it may come in above the limit that I could just bring it back to you and put it on the consent.
That's fine.
So I'm looking for a couple other companies to do the same type. They have good reputations. We can put it out and hopefully bring it back within the next couple of months.
Perfect, thank you.
Yes, sir.
That's all I have, Mayor.
Thank you. And for old business, all I had is I know that there was some discussion about boating and boating safety, and I was out with my family on the water over the weekend, and I saw pretty much all different departments out there policing, so it looked like it was well policed. So I wanted to, and I saw our boat out. I don't remember if it was weekend or not, but they've been out, so I wanted to thank the police department for their efforts. And that's all I had.
How many people do we have to train for COD?
It would have to be the entire patrol division, and any other entities that might have access to the CAD system.
That'd be a dispatch also? I
Yes.
imagine. So we're talking 20 people.
Roughly 20, yes.
We've been waiting for this CAD system for almost a year now. And the county is the one that's been dragging their feet. We're really looking forward to being able to bring in some information now, so I hope that happens. But the delay has not been on the part of the city, it's been on the part of the county, from what I understand.
That's what I understand as well. So we're trying to keep on top of them, but you can only do so much when you are not the one in control.
If you're at the mercy of the other.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. McCleary? Mr. Kinsella?
The only thing I have is there any more information on the DEP permit extension application?
I didn't understand that question.
The DEP permit extension application. The last meeting, had discussion earlier.
Right, and I've discussed it with Dewberry Engineering, who's handling that project for us, and they have applied for the permit. We just haven't received the actual approval yet. The current permit, as my understanding, doesn't expire until sometime this October, and I know we're edging in on that late.
Correct.
Not quite as fast as a bullet, but at least fast enough to be a little spooky. But I'll check with Dewberry again tomorrow and see if they've got an update for us.
That's all.
Thank you. That concludes our old business. Looking for a motion?
Motion to adjourn.
All in favor?
Aye.